Hey, what's going on there, guys? Earthmaster here. Saturday night, February 24th, 2018, about 9 p.m. Actually, straight up 9 p.m. here on the West Coast in California. And, of course, looking at the earthquake 3D globe here on the right and some live data over here on the left side of the screen. A little bit of weird interference being picked up on this station right here in Mammoth Lakes, California. Long Valley supervolcano showing a, well, look at this sequence of interference, I guess, because it's been like that for quite some time, and they're just too consistent to be earthquake signature. So definitely some type of heartbeat interference, I call it. Could be from some machinery nearby or whatnot, but definitely too consistent there. Other than that, most of the earthquake data stations coming in pretty quiet. Small amount of activity there in a Chile station there. Yellowstone National Park at the moment just showing a small little spike, and nothing major coming over on the data section right now. Here's the latest overview of the Yellowstone National Park seismograph stations here, and it's looking. Let's make sure that we're on. Yes, we are. Okay. You never know about that hotkey. It just sometimes it fails me. Anyway. It looked like it picked up. This earthquake activity picked up dramatically earlier, this morning. And you can see this cluster of extreme earthquakes here. I thought the swarm was going to really pick up and ramp up here, which it did for about, probably about 2.5, 3 hours, this little period right here of increased multitudes of earthquakes there. I mean, there's a number of earthquakes there. Just looking at this seismograph station, well over 100 or more earthquakes just today within this little map area, or within this little graph. And once again, as I like to point out, every one of these earthquakes here is going to be a blue spike. You see these little ones? Those are earthquakes, numerous ones. And then, of course, you have the ones that are registering the red line, which are all a little bit stronger. And USGS will be issuing, I'm sure, earthquakes or notifications for the majority of these quakes once they get caught up to it. But definitely increased for a little while. A little small spit here of increased activity. Since then, last few hours, been fairly quiet. There has been some smaller activity. Little bigger one right here, but nothing like we seen there earlier, way earlier today, with this increased seismic activity there in the park. Pretty crazy looking. And of course that activity showed up on the numerous other stations as well, like Holmes Hill. You can see it a little bit showing up as well, but a distant station from the main earthquake swarm. Swarm area right now still located in the northwest corner of the park here near Maple Creek YMC station right here. This activity here, interference once again showing up. Possible wind within the Lake Yellowstone area. Other than that, pretty quiet, folks. Nothing down in the Idaho region. This right here may be activity. It is actually activity from the swarm being picked up on this graph as well. Probably a little bit more magnified signal, I guess. You know, it's a little bit more sensitive, so it is picking up the earthquake activity further up north here. But rest of the park, for example, southeast area, looking pretty quiet for the most part. A little west in the central park, looking quiet as well. California activity, Nevada, California map, most recent one right here. A little bit of activity near Mammoth Lakes, California. That's the station I was talking about, the interference there, showing that little heartbeat of a frequency every 5 seconds or so. 3.5 near Big Pine, California, just outside of the, a little ways away. I'm not going to call it just right there because you got Mammoth Lakes over here to the west a little bit, and 3.5 as well outside of the Caldera region there of the Long Valley supervolcano. But other than that, pretty quiet. Little earthquake up here near South Lake Tahoe region, and a smaller one up here, actually right underneath the north part of Lake Tahoe. small little swarm occurring. It looks like near Incline Village. Now that's near Truckee, just east of Truckee region there on Interstate 80. Probably right before you get to the Nevada-California state line there. Looks like it's just to the west of this dotted line, which indicates the border for California and Nevada. And we got an earthquake coming in, like always. This one here, just a 1.5, looks like over there. But we'll get to this here in just a minute. And like I said, there's a little bit of a swarm. I mean, these are, look at that. You can't even really tell how many earthquakes are within this region. But luckily, we can see down here, they do have a number for us. 53 earthquakes just on this map alone. When you're looking around the map here, you see maybe 1 or 2, 3 or 4. Most of those 53 are confined in that little bitty area, that little cluster of an earthquake swarm, I guess, up there near Incline Village. Now, these earthquakes are relatively small, nothing big. I don't even think we have any in the 3 range. 2.1 looks like it may be the largest of the earthquake activity that's occurring near Truckee. But once again, there's numerous earthquakes, a lot of small micro earthquakes, 0.5, 0.3, you know, some smaller ones, even a negative one there, 0.03. I guess I haven't got to the data on that, but still, nonetheless, earthquake activity occurring near Truckee, California. So it's definitely an area to watch. It is the Sierra Nevada mountains. A lot of, well, that's right, actually, on the east slope of the Sierra Nevadas here. You got the majority, the height of the Sierras is over here to the west. This right here, once you get out of Truckee and head into Reno, if anybody's been down that road, they know everything starts to mellow out, get lower in elevation a little bit, and everything turns dry and kind of deserty. So it's basically right there on the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevadas over here where all the mountain ranges are, where the peaks are, Donner Summit and whatnot within that range. I did check the real-time tremor earlier, and there's not a whole lot of activity on there. There's the real-time over the past 12 hours, and go back to the last 48, shows very minimal activity, if anything. And that's, you know, like I said last night, I don't know if I should be concerned about this because we're not seeing any tremor movement, which is the plates slowly slipping underneath each other. Or for example, you got the Pacific plate over here to the west and the North American plate there, a little bit more inland there into Oregon, Washington, and northern California, in this area that is known as the Cascadia subduction zone, where the two plates subduct underneath, well, the one on the west subducts underneath the east. And that, you know, a lot of people said you should be concerned when we don't see activity like this, when we don't see any kind of tremor detection, which means it's basically locked in a way. Of course, areas, you know, Cascadia subduction zone, there's always some locked areas, but the subducting part is, when we don't see that activity, kind of worries me a tad bit. And, you know, it's hard to say if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Because if we see activity, right, if we see the large-scale movement, the tremor detection movement along the west coast, then we know, well, there's definitely stuff moving. And, you know, there's pressure being applied underneath the North American plate when that happens with that slow detection. So, you know, I don't think it's good either way. I mean, I just think this whole area right here is dangerous, extremely dangerous, and very fragile when it comes to possibly unloading a large earthquake in the region. And, of course, the San Andreas fault system plays a little part into that, a little bit further down into California. And then you have the cluster of fault zones. You got the Calaveras fault zone, which we're watching a little bit, the Hayward fault, many other fault systems throughout California, and it's all a little very fragile network of spider web faults. And right now we're kind of watching this area, like I mentioned last night. Activity has calmed down a tad bit. Just been a couple 1.7s near There's a 1.7 there. Nothing big, but still some activity on the northern section of the Calaveras Fault System right here. You can see this just east of the Berkeley area. Calaveras Fault System runs up through here. Got the Hayward Fault over here. I did want to show you guys real quick an article that I read here on this site right here. If you want to check it out, I will leave the link below in the description video. Bay Area, this was just published today, by the way, February 24th. Bay Area earthquake swarm edges towards a major Calaveras fault. Not going to read this whole thing, but during the past week, 75 earthquakes have rattled the beautiful town of Danville, scene of the beloved Robin Williams movie Miss Doubtfire. I did not know that. The quakes are occurring at a depth of 3 to 4 miles on a heretofore unmapped fault or set of faults, and exhibit a diversity of mechanisms, some similar to the right lateral, whichever side you're on, Calaveras Fault, and others perhaps related to the blind thrust fault that has jacked up Mount Diablo. Although most of the quakes in the week's swarm are 2 to 3 miles from the Calaveras Fault, the swarm has been migrating towards the Calaveras Fault System over the past few days. Now this here is a little bit, another map right here shows you the direction of these faults that are migrating towards this northern end of the Calaveras Fault System here, which is it's pretty much a high risk area for earthquake activity, as it's been diagnosed, or at least assessed, over the past 10 years. Diagnosed sound like a medical term there. Let's see, the largest historical quake in the Calaveras Fault was a 6.6 back in 1911. Let's read on a little bit more. It talks a little bit about swarms. There's another earthquake here real quick. Looks like a 2.2 in that same region over here. But anyway, I'll read this last paragraph right here. It says, nevertheless, should this swarm penetrate the Calaveras Fault, the chances of a larger shock will climb, and the monitoring vigilance will intensify. Of course, as always, as I like to mention, if you live, work in the East Bay area, this is the time to ask yourself if you're quake ready. This means having an emergency kit and plan, securing your contents, retrofitting an older home, and considering insurance. Or how about move the heck out of California? That sounds like a plan to me. Anyway, I would not want to be down there in the Bay Area when that thing hits. Definitely going to be quite a shaker down there. This is the town of Danville that I was talking about here. You can see the a lot of faults, a lot of raised, newer hills up here showing obvious pressure with Mount Diablo over here in the background. Just a lot of mechanisms at work here, folks. And of course the Pacific Plate, the San Andreas Fault System there, plays a large part in this area as well. It's a very complex system of faults, and this is an area that is very vulnerable right now, and definitely need to pay attention to what's going on there. Hopefully everyone is prepared that does live in that region, as of course the activity still continues, and nonetheless, like they mentioned in the article, inching towards the northern section of the Calaveras Fault System there. Worldwide activity, real quick. Still getting a couple. What do we got? 2.2 there in this region of the world. Let's go ahead and check that out real quick, because seeing kind of like we've seen 2 earthquake notifications there within that region. Near France, 2.2 from the EMSC. This is occurring, of course, just right now at a depth of 2 kilometers. These are just small little earthquakes here that is popping off. But you know, it's those are micro earthquakes. Anything above a 3 or 4, then we'd start wondering, we start looking more into it. But that's just kind of minor activity at the moment, which the EMSC is reporting. Of course, Chile down there having their typical 4s and 3s. A little bit of activity, older activity there in Oklahoma region, and some older activity in Alaska. Newest activity looks like it's still around the Fiji Islands region and stretching down here a little bit. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of activity out there, folks, tonight. Pretty quiet on the earthquake scale. And Greenland area, looking, cover that real quick. Pretty quiet, nothing really happening, no sizable earthquakes up there. At least according to the USGS right now, EMSC and also GeoNet, which is all included in the earthquake 3D globe data. Solar weather is pretty gosh darn low, folks. Not a whole lot of activity occurring in the solar weather department. And check that out real quick. I did include the text update here, stating a geomatic storm is predicted 65% chance of a G1 class geomagnetic storm on February 26th, and that's just from a coronal hole. No sunspots, as you can see right here. The sun is blank, absolutely no sunspots whatsoever, and we are going into that minimum that they're talking about. It'd be interesting to see how this affects conditions here on Earth. You know, with that minimum going on there. Because I remember just a few years ago, we seen that maximum where we almost had like 7 or 8 sunspots, large sunspots on the sun at any given time. There, it was pretty crazy. The amount of activity that was occurring. Now it's just quiet. Pretty quiet. And according down here to this article, the sun is descending into a deep solar minimum. And the neck, and what is that? Nadir? Nadar? That kind of looks like it may be French. Nadir. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Expected in 2019 to 2020. Color could be colored pink. This is just a little article about how the colors, different colors and the auroras indicate different gases and whatnot. Like pink aurora is a sign of nitrogen, and etc. You have to check that out if you want there at spaceweather.com. Pretty cool site, which I use quite a bit for solar weather updates. Also, solarham.net is another good one if you're interested in space weather. Well, that's it for the earthquake update, folks. You know, it's pretty quiet out here, pretty mellow. I've been watching, bouncing in and out of the chat all day, at least monitoring a little bit. It's been pretty quiet. So make sure you share this video with your friends. Share it out there on Google, Twitter, Facebook. You know, Facebook is a good one to use as far as getting it out to your friends. So if you guys can do me a favor, share this video with your friends, and at least this one time Saturday night, and maybe we can get some more viewers out here on the live chat tonight, and get those views up a tad bit. All right, folks, have a great night. I am going to go outside and braze the cold a little bit more, and get some more moon shots, and I'll probably do a couple star shots as well. It's hard to get the galaxy and whatnot in the long exposure photography because of the light radiation from the moon, but I will attempt to get some star shots included in there as well, with some close-up shots of the moon. So, all right, folks, take care. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you a little bit later on.